Okay, I think we're live now, right? Yep. Hi, welcome everybody to September 7th, 2021, our workshop, the City of Auburn. First on the agenda is a city council discussion using American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, funds that we've received. I'm going to turn this over to City Manager Kroll, and then we'll enter into a brainstorming idea for the next 60 minutes with the council. Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Council. You have the information I have up here that I provided for you regarding Councilor Milks had requested that we go through the strategic plan and pull out sections of the strategic plan that align with what would be allowable funds to be spent out of ARPA. We've done that, made that available for you. I have them up on the slides if we need to refer back to them. But really, this is your open discussion, and we'll be here, staff is here to take notes, to compile a list of your recommendations. Some of those I might be able to tell you right off the bat whether or not they're eligible. Some of them we might need to dig into. What I've provided so far in this list are things that are eligible, but still need a little further consideration or detailing. But I'll go ahead and open it up to you, Council, for your discussion. Hopefully some of you came with some recommendations.
Let's do this. Let's, spirit of fairness here, why don't we start off to my left, Councilor McLeod. And if you have any ideas, again, I don't think there's any idea that's good, not good, bad. Let's throw them out there. We'll take notes. And then after we go around once, why don't we have a little bit of discussion? Phil, see if it's qualified or if it needs more research. Okay. Councilor McLeod, are you okay going first? Or?
Yeah, sure. So right under industrial solutions, I really like the idea of agricultural processing and distribution in our city as a hub.
Do you have anything more specific on that, or just agricultural processing solutions?
That's it. Nothing more specific. Trying to be broad for now.
Okay. Councilor Zine?
One question about process, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
The process for organizations to find out information, details about this, about access to funds, and if it's available.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. Phil?
So
I don't understand the question.
If there's an outside organization that's looking to access funds, that would only be if the council had identified that you wanted to make funds available to outside organizations.
Okay,
So,
it's not a process where they can come to us and say, we think we qualify, and this is what we're interested in doing.
You could have somebody come forward that way,
Okay.
but it would be whether or not the council has allocated funds for that expenditure.
Okay.
Nonprofits, even though if a nonprofit was to come forward and request dollars, it still needs to meet the requirements of ARPA. They still are held accountable to that. They still have to do our reporting, and we still have to make those reports based on their expenditures. So all that still has to be in alignment, but you can certainly do that.
Okay, so is it appropriate to, not to privilege any over others, but those who have asked about this, to get in touch with them and say they should be in touch with you, or they should be in touch with Rita, or what?
Why don't you bring them up?
No, I would say if it should be done here at this level.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You want to bring one up?
No.
You want to bring up an idea of allocating a certain or X percentage of funds to qualified nonprofits?
No, not now, thank you.
Councilor Boss?
Thank you. I'd like to see some of the funds be used toward lead hazard remediation in our housing stock. We did just win $3.4 million through HUD. However, those funds would be used toward 110 units, and we have many more units in our city that have lead in them. And we have great data and great maps that were created as part of the HUD application, so we really can be targeted in utilizing those funds. And if we know anything, we know that we spend a lot more time in our homes, many of us. And so if we talk about recovery, we talk about serving as many people and doing the most good we can, I think that working on our housing stock is a major improvement and a great use of these funds. That's what I have.
Councilor Milks?
I'm in favor of sticking with strategic plan projects.
Is there any other additional projects that you think might marry up with that?
No.
Okay. Councilor Carrier?
I'd like to see us do more with internet access programs, making sure that we have internet across the city. I know we can wait for the federal government to allocate more funds down the road, but if we've got the funds, I'd like to see us jump on that immediately.
I think I just read $174 million additional for Maine broadband access, if I remember correctly from the federal ARPA money, but, okay. And, Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see more under the food programs, food security, education and stuff. Right now, a good friend of mine has said we don't have a shortage of food, we've got a shortage of distribution, of getting it to where it needs to go. And also, some of the foods that we're giving out at the various food pantries, not everybody knows how to use it. So a lot of the food, say like rice, not a lot of people know how to use, I'm just taking it for instance, rice is a grain dry, how to reconstitute it, how to cook it, and how to use it. We're also having generational issues on some people grew up with certain types of food and they're giving something else when they get this other food, so they don't know how to prepare or cook it. And then as new people come in to Auburn, per se, from other parts of the country, they don't always identify with what foods we have to offer. So I'd like to see not just providing food, trying to keep track of where it is to get it to the distribution of it, but also possibly educate people and our kids on what a certain vegetable or grain is, how it can be used and stuff. And also I'd like to set up some sort of training programs, like maybe helping people learn about food storage or canning and things. Also, another thing is if I mean, what I've just talked about comes under like 2.1 food programs, a 210, I think, and maybe we can get away with 3.5 on this. The other thing I'd like to see is if we can use money for water infiltration and different things, I would like to see us use some of the money in order to improve our outlet out here, where we've been trying to figure a solution so that people can go back swimming and get more enjoyment out of it. Because it would be more cost effective to fix our outlet and allow people to swim there than to reinvent the wheel and build a beach in our Lake Auburn and our drinking water.
Councilor Walker?
Yeah, I would definitely like to see some addition to our recreation, and I could point out a couple things that I'm sure they're headed down the road for, but like in the New Auburn area, the Little Androscoggin, there needs to be a nice footbridge there to connect Newbury Street and, to the New Auburn area, so we don't have to stay on the main street to get to Bonnie Park and move on from there. Also, I have heard that Taylor Pond, or at least a section of it, is up for sale. I'd like to see us look at that and see if some of this funding couldn't maybe purchase that section that's for sale. And again, I agree with Councilor Belinda here that I think we should still work on East Auburn Beach, making sure that that is a full opportunity with recreation, not just swimming, but bringing the seniors to that area by bringing recreation things for them to do, not just spending money on something that 6, 7, and 8-year-olds can use in that area. And then in the New Auburn area, I would hope that we're going to try to work with the elderly and help them with fixing up homes down there at 0 interest rate. And if we can't do 0, then we should at least look at, a 1% 30-year loan or something, and worry about the payback, that type of focus. If they pass on, I would think we would want it so they can, the home is paid for, whatever we've lent them, and the house goes on to the next. That's just some of my goals.
Okay. We went around once. I'm just going to look around. Is there any other ideas? Everybody had a chance to give one. We'll start with Councilor McLeod.
So I'm not sure how this would actually come to fruition, but I would like to see us stand up some either small retail space or small food space downtown and or around Auburn to allow small businesses to come here and try it out, similar to how the
Pop-up?
Yeah,
Incubator?
that's what I'm looking for. Same thing, around Christmas, having that type of thing around town would allow us to have more retail space spread out through our downtown area and anywhere really, but it would allow businesses to try out Auburn, as well as allow smaller food production places to, rent out a space and do a week of dining service in a certain area and just, like that. And I think that would be more vibrant to Auburn.
So on that, if you want to research, German Christmas villages usually run for a month. They're pop-ups, they're in downtowns, they're temporary. It's a great idea, and they're really catching on around the East Coast now, in the U.S. Okay, Councilor Zani?
Thank you. In terms of employment opportunities, and the second bullet point down regarding community passenger rail connectivity, rather than focusing on that, because there is certainly work going on with community rail connectivity, is to look at innovative ways to provide transportation for people, particularly in areas, for example, in North Auburn, so that there's some kind of a public transportation process that's innovative. We can't just depend on Western Maine transportation.
Anything else, Councilor Boss?
Yeah, nothing new, but I'd like to share my support also for our food security, food sustainability efforts, both shared by Councilor Gary and also Councilor McLeod. I think it's really critically important that we're looking at base human needs with these funds.
Okay. Councilor Milks? Anyone?
I agree with Councilor Gary's mentioning that it is a distribution issue, and that I support that that's, in addition to Councilor Boss, that's an area we should be looking at, food distribution.
Is there any other new ideas before we kind of look at the merits? Any other new, different? No? Oh, okay, so.
If it would be helpful, well, two things. One, if folks can just make sure you're really talking into the mic. Brian mentioned that. It's difficult to hear everyone. If you'd like, we could go through the couple slides here.
Let's do the slides and talk about some of the other projects too. I think this is a good list.
Yep.
And let's just make sure we still are kind of in agreement with some of the other ideas. And then look at this list, adding them all in, and then we can give direction out to staff. We can actually talk about some of the pros and cons too, and some of the nuances of each one of these proposals as well. Maybe brainstorm some ideas as we go through the list, okay?
So going through the strategic plan under growth goal 1, under solutions, talked about drinking water. What would be allowable is some type of follow-up or analysis of the Lake Auburn study, action as allowable under EPA rules. So the way the feds had identified this is that it must be, you have to use the EPA rules if you're going to use any funds, opera funds, as it pertains to drinking water. Also in our strategic plan was recreational opportunities. Already mentioned was swimming access. You could also include events, programs, a feasibility assessment of facilities and implementation. We are doing part of that now, and we've done those studies already, so we could build off from that, especially leverage any recommendations that come from those studies. Still under growth 1 was inventory of all recreation properties. Again, part of this is being done. However, GIS mapping with layers of uses and needs assessment, that did come out of the strategic plan process that could meet this, especially if you have it available for people to know where can they go and access recreational activities, properties. And again, that was city and non-city. Also under growth was future development of trails and parks. Talked about the pump track in the urban setting. That would be an allowable use. Develop, plan, and implement trail connectivity. If you go through the strategic plan, I think trail connectivity was probably mentioned at least a dozen times throughout that. And so again, for those who might be listening or those that are attending, the strategic plan involved about almost 150 people that participated in that. But each one of those groups under different sections talked about trail connectivity and focusing on walkability within the city. Developing an outdoor recreational complex. Again, if it's outdoor, that allows for people to get outdoor activity, that makes it an eligible project within ARPA. Downtown solutions for growth goal 2 was more outdoor seating or dining opportunities, as Councilor McLeod mentioned, would be allowable. One area that we've talked about and certainly brainstormed some is regarding utilizing these Connex boxes converted into a pop-up where businesses could come in and maybe use that facility for a month as a cafe or whatever might be available. Other communities have set up oyster bars, they've set up different things. The state is also, through the State Economic Development Department, is also providing some money for this as well, encouraging this throughout the state, so you could leverage some of our dollars with the state dollars to potentially make that happen. And those would be something that you could move to different areas of the city, as Councilor McLeod mentioned. It could be focused here on the downtown, and then you could move it to Anniversary Park area, or you could set these up for different events in areas that might be taking place. Promote and create identity for downtown. This would be as it focuses on events, programming, arts, entertainment. And this also links with the Quality Goal 5, which will also include Festival Plaza. As you know, Festival Plaza redesign has been completed. Or at least there's options. There's nothing that's set in stone at this point, but the renditions have been done with options of consider. We do have feedback from events that have been taking place, especially during the community band concerts, where people were able to weigh in on different elements that they liked down at Festival Plaza. So we'll make that available to you in a future meeting, but that would be something that would be allowable because, again, it gets people outside and outdoor activities. Agriculture processing and distribution under the industrial solution that was already mentioned. Directed public infrastructure, HVAC replacement at city facilities. These would be any buildings that we manage and control throughout the city. Many of these are coming up in future CIP projects that you have before you. We have buildings like the Pal Center, like Hasty, certainly the fire station. Some of those are coming in under the public safety plan, so we'd have to kind of thread that a little differently to determine whether or not that's a new build. If it's a new build, then it wouldn't be eligible. But if it's a building that's being renoed like Engine 5 would be, that would be an eligible expense. CLT, several members are here. We've taken a look at that. That's part of what we've identified as some costs. We have a future, if council says yes, we'd like to offset dollars that we are planning to spend under HVAC. You have some of those in the current budget this year. And say, let's not spend that under our CIP, let's use ARPA dollars, then we could do that, then you could reallocate those funds that are in CIP and also future dollars that do not have the same restrictions as ARPA. So that's one thing that you can consider. Pedestrian trail networking, expanding sewer and water service to areas that currently do not have it. So if there's an area within Auburn that we identified that we want to see future growth, future development, you could allocate funds out of ARPA for expanding that water and sewer service. Great Falls Master Plan implementation was a part of the strategic plan. And I really think that the area that probably most focuses on this, but we could look at other elements as well, but it has to do with the stormwater pipe that's across Great Falls that would have to be removed for any real development to take place over there. So that could be something that could be allocated through ARPA. And that's looking at about $900,000 project, so.
So, when, based upon what the city manager said, a couple of what everybody mentioned here, I'm just going through it quickly, like agricultural processing solution. Sure, it could fit under B1, industrial solutions for ag. Okay, that's something to look at. There's a lot of this that does. One thing I'm not seeing is lead hazard remediation. I knew it's in here, and I think it's not applicable, but allowable with the ARPA regulations from Treasury. But I just didn't see it. I mean, obviously we don't see it here. I think we just have to look back.
So yeah, so what you're looking at here is our strategic plan. I'd have to go back through, Councilor Boss and I talked about this earlier. I don't recall where lead abatement stood out in our strategic plan. However, it certainly is allowable because it's under housing improvements. So, so that would certainly be an eligible expense. Yes.
Yeah, I would just add that our council goals that we talked about at our own retreat early on in our first term was primarily about improving downtown housing. And the HUD grants absolutely do that. Any lead remediation is going to improve the quality of downtown housing, so it's a dual purpose goal.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it's rehabilitation of older housing stock is in the strategic plan, which obviously qualify. But yeah, so I think, based upon that, I think this is, lead hazard is the only one that's not jumping out in front of us right now on this. Not to say it doesn't exist.
So it does certainly
housing
fits under
solutions.
this housing solutions here, where one defining neighborhoods geographically, that was one that came up again several times throughout the strategic plan. Auburn, the way that we are designed, the way that it's hard to define what neighborhood do you live in. You could ask people that are probably living next door to each other, and they would identify themselves with different neighborhoods. So really being able to do that is something that we could work on. The reason why you could allow this is because when we need to get information out to neighborhoods, especially regarding anything that has to do with public safety, health safety, we want to make sure we're communicating out to neighborhoods. If there's a way to identify and notify a neighborhood that this is something that's happening or a service that's available in your neighborhood now, this is how you'll access. One thing that we weren't able to do, which many communities were during COVID, they would say, Auburn Hall on Mondays is open to these neighborhoods. You can come in and do your business on these days. So that way there you had less people coming into Auburn Hall at any given date. We couldn't do that. There was no way that we could geographically say for someone to understand where they lived and how to communicate to them to be able to do that. If we were to use dollars to be able to do that, then we could ensure that people would really have that. But what it also goes to is it goes to an identity as well. So that there's a lot of value that comes into, I can identify that we're a neighborhood, this is where we live. I want to make sure we're taking better care of our neighborhood. All those things come into just good communication and being able to recognize that. Councilor?
Thank you. So could we, in terms of neighborhood identification, could we use funds in terms of creating online presence that is supported, not just by the neighborhood, but has general support? People may start a website for a certain neighborhood and then they come and go.
Yeah, so our city website would be where we would break that out. And you're right, there's the groups that start and go, and so that would be something that we could identify. Someone could go in, someone could look at an app and say, this is where I live, this is the neighborhood I'm part of, and my neighborhood has these meetings, these nights, as far as informational sessions and what have you. So,
Okay.
Councilor Wilkes?
Yeah, and I would like to see we didn't specify in the strategic plan lead abatement, and we have federal dollars that are targeted towards that. And I want to hesitate in being too specific because there was never a mention in anything on the strategic plan about specifically lead. And what can happen is if we specify that it's got to be to lead as opposed to general improvement of housing stock, that it pigeonholes money that way. And it can be very expensive to go just specifically to a lead abatement, as opposed to renovating and improving housing stock in general, and then use the federal dollars that are targeted specifically towards lead abatement for lead abatement. So I would hesitate for us to pigeonhole what we're looking to do with money that isn't already pigeonholed.
I think you'll also have, we'll be coming before you with a presentation regarding the grant. It's going to be important to hear, as Councilor Boss had mentioned, the 110 homes that's allocated in there. Be important to hear what's that timeline for those. And then it might be really beneficial for us to take a look at if we could leverage some of the resources that are coming through the grant. That's going to be something we should probably consider. And so keeping it on a list, especially as, like you said, regarding incentives for investment into properties and improvements, so you're not pigeonholed, but at least allows for it, then I think that's good. Because if we're going to be setting up a structure for this lead project, the more funds that we could allocate to get, take that 110 housing units upwards of 175 or more, then you could use that same structure. That's the structure that we won't have to pay for out of city dollars. We're going to use HUD dollars as far as the infrastructure in place, because that's 2 additional staff members. It's that additional work that comes with that. So, yeah, no, that's a great idea.
In a renovation, a lot of your lead issues get taken care of by upgrading all of the things on a house. So, again, leveraging, working together, not leaving one out.
Yeah. So that covers the incentives for residents. Efficiency Maine. So you've already allocated 225, Rita? 250? 250,000 for matching dollars. So if you receive Maine efficiency credit or grant, you would, and say it was for $1,000, you're going to be able to apply for that matching $1,000. Maine Municipal has really worked hard at getting some attorneys and staff members that are digging into ARPA, getting a really great handle on it. I can send a request in for clarification. They're getting it back to me within the day. And so it's a great resource for us. One of those that I submitted was regarding Efficiency Maine allocation that we had done. Originally, we thought that would have to be within those 2 census tracts, and it would be income related. That's not the case. It can be anywhere in the city. What they would need to do, though, is part of our application process will require them, if they were impacted negatively by COVID-19 during the pandemic, then they would have to mark that, and that then makes them eligible. So there's no income eligibility requirement on that matching dollars. So that's good feedback. Many of you wanted to see it citywide. It is available citywide. They just have to talk whether or not they had a negative impact on COVID-19 as a family. So we hope to stand that up probably in October, now that we've got some of that clarification. We'll be utilizing our General Assistance Director as the intake of those, and we'll be going through our Community Development Office on processing those and getting those out. Basically, you have to show that you received that credit from Efficiency Maine. Once you verify that, you check that other box, then you're now eligible, and we can make that available. But we need to do a lot more on promotion for the community.
I'm sorry, that was one question that I had about that, and also how you were affected. I hope that it's specific enough so that people understand what it takes to actually apply for that funding.
Yeah, so the language that came from the attorneys at MMA, it's one sentence. Were you negatively impacted by COVID-19? That's really it. And I think there might be an example in there. I think the example was, did part of your household lose income, or as a result of, it might have been something regarding as a result of lost work for providing childcare. I think that was one of those examples.
Okay, that's helpful.
Pretty broad.
Yeah, pretty broad, yeah. All right, employment opportunity solutions. This was out of the quality goal 1, was creating a metric to measure cost competitiveness to do business in Auburn over time. This is one that was certainly on there. It is one that you could look at. It didn't go to one of our final recommendations, but obviously workforce development is a struggle. Anything that we can do to assist a business to demonstrate that there is there's impacts as a result of what they're doing, but how can they become competitive with other industries in the state or in the region? How could we maybe assist them? That's what this would provide. I think we need to do a lot more on this. I think it would be important for us to tie in with the chamber on this project if we were to do it. The chamber is working towards this. They have regional roundtables currently going on regarding workforce development strategies. We could connect with them to see what they're doing. This would be one that would be really beneficial to get the county behind and leverage some of the county dollars, because this workforce development impacts the entire county and region. So, but this is one that we could dig into if you'd like. Conduct study regarding commuter passenger rail connectivity. Again, this was in the strategic plan. This would be eligible under those dollars. I already mentioned extending water and sewer. It was mentioned a couple times throughout the plan. That's why it's in here twice. Community connection solutions, identify and define neighborhoods. Again, we already mentioned it, but it was in quality goal 3 as well. Quality goal 5 was better public relations, image, and branding. This is where we talked about the website, software solutions. Think about it this way. If we could we moved a lot to online during COVID through being eligible for people to be able to access permits, being able to pay for services. We're doing a lot when it comes to planning and permitting. So if you need to pull a permit for your building, especially if you're a contractor, our system is getting stood up, so you'll be able to do that easily. There's other things that we could do within the city that also would help in that. And part of this is about if we were to go into another shutdown, or if we were to have inability to be able to open up as a community for any type of real disaster or issue, being able to improve your website and software solutions to do that, that's where we'd be able to handle that. Folks that come in, there's a spillover in the council chambers, and there's seats right there, and you can watch us, we're on the screen. And then a city mobile app that would be able to do a lot of things, especially what's happening, what's the activity, how can I access it?
Bill, just real quick, I'd like to break a little bit on this. Leroy had a question?
Yeah.
Leroy,
I did
and then-
Yeah, the replacement of the storm water line, or whatever we want to call it, in the huge parking lot over here,
Yeah.
if we were to do that, would there be an advantage for us to move other things ahead there, or would it just fix the storm problem?
I think we would it would be smart for us to leverage it, right? I think that there's opportunity for future development there. If we could leverage that to be able to move other things along in that, the master plan there, then I think we should.
Okay, second question, the storm, where it lies right now, is that our property or is it not our property?
It's a combination.
It runs under two parcel IDs, if I remember correctly, ours
Parcels.
and the privately held one.
That's correct.
For sure.
I will check in again with the city engineer, but I'm pretty certain that goes across two property owners,
So
us and one other.
what I'd like to do now, you have one more, you have another question? I wanted to kind of truncate this a bit, but can we pause and not go into quality goal 5 just right yet?
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of bullets. Can we just right now open up a little discussion, and let me just preface it with this. Talking about the projects that Phil's outlined that have come from other past conversations up to quality number 5, and think about, is there anything right now that jumps out as something that you don't think is worthwhile or worthy expenditure of ARPA money on? And I will applaud staff and council for bringing forth some of these ideas here. And I think a lot of them will cover some of the ideas we've already talked about. But is there anything here that, A, doesn't have a positive ROI, whether it be financial or social return on investment? Is there anything here that really isn't economically sustainable for the long term in our city that could present maybe a negative economic outcome a decade from now? Just giving you some ideas of things to look at. Is there anything here that we should address?
Can I just ask
Tim?
a quantifying question? I know there were some meetings between regional partners and the county. Did anything come from that in terms
Yeah.
of ideas that we could piggyback on with some of our regional partners so we could all get a better benefit, or?
I've got to follow up with them. I broached the idea, if they had any ideas to come to us. I left the door very, very wide open for ideas that came from this group to go back to them, okay? As well as our other partners. Some of this is, we don't want to bring, or Phil or I don't want to bring a separate idea or initiative to the county or Central Maine Community College or whomever, without it first being vetted and talked about here at council, because that would be inappropriate. So that will all come after kind of this conversation and some general consensus.
Going back to the conduct study regarding commuter passenger rail connectivity, I don't think we need to put money into that.
Well, that is actually on the agenda for tonight.
I
Okay.
know.
So-
So I just wanted to put that out there, and then also say, is it possible to refocus that, keeping it under employment opportunities, and is it appropriate to talk about transportation, public transportation in general here? That's what I don't say. I mentioned it before because I think that's an extreme need within our community.
And you mentioned public transportation within the community as well.
Yeah,
So we got rail. Rail will be decided tonight, actually.
Right.
So, and then obviously if it's decided not to do it, then it comes off. If it's decided to do it, then it will probably stay on.
The recommendation tonight is that comes out of your comp plan dollars that are currently allocated,
I thought it was
not
ARPA.
under ARPA.
I thought it was ARPA money for that.
No, comp plan.
Okay. Okay, well, it could be amended for ARPA or not, but I think first we have to have that discussion on whether or not we want to go ahead and do that, but, so we'll settle it tonight.
Okay,
either way.
yeah, well, just to keep
And-
the idea of generally
Mhm.
public transportation within the community, which I haven't seen.
No, and you brought that up, so that will be, everything that was brought up that wasn't covered in here, I think we can add that in, we'll have that discussion as well. But is there anything here right now that is problematic? That someone wants to have, any more clarifying questions on, wants to pull it, feels strongly against?
Can we clarify the Lake Auburn study follow-up? Provide more detail on what that would be?
So there's a lot of sections within there's pieces within the strategic plan that talked about drinking water. There's a lot of eligible projects within ARPA that work towards drinking water. There's a whole section on it. I provided that to you in the eligibility list. So this was, the way that I listed this was that if there's something that comes out of Lake Auburn study as a recommendation, then you could look at ARPA money to move forward in that direction.
So implementation funds.
For implementation.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, here's an idea that I was thinking of too on that note. Let's say with the new federal infrastructure bill that's winding its way ever so slowly through Congress right now, but it looks like it's going to be complete. There's literally billions and billions for water filtration. Right now, Auburn Water Department does not have a shovel-ready water filtration plan as per EPA's guidance back in 2008. They told them to do so. We could use some of this money in order to generate that plan. That way we could apply for federal stimulus dollars and infrastructure in order to have a water filtration plant paid for. That would be one idea, very, very loose. But that's a concept. It can go in a number of different ways. Is there any other ideas that are on this list right now that really, again, this list before we go into quality goal 2 that wants to be talked about a little bit more? No? Okay. Phil, when you go into quality goal 5, I just wanted to break that up a little bit so we had time.
The quality goal 5 was regarding entertainment, cultural opportunities, historic preservation and solutions, beautification and maintenance of parks. Again, this is about getting people outside and in a safer environment. So riverwalk, trails, and other areas where entertainment events take place would be allowable use. There was a section there that talked about river as an asset. Again, if we were to promote activities and events along the river, then you would be able to do that. Enhance current activities, develop a marketing strategy to attract tourism. There's an entire section regarding eligible expenses as it pertains to tourism. That tourism could also connect with sports tourism. When we talked about the bike track earlier and the outdoor field complexes, that would be an eligible expense. And then in the strategic plan, it talked about improving or moving community little theater. The moving conversation was back when they were talking about the new high school. That's why it's worded that way. But I think we've moved beyond that, but still improving community little theater was in the strategic plan and could be an allowable expense, especially as we take a look at the HVAC system. Quality goal 5, under the same section, was make sure community events are age-friendly and accessible. Again, this is really hitting more towards that accessibility. How would they be accessible? Could we provide good, safe gathering? Those would be items that would be eligible. Expanding the museum and the streets. Again, this would be encouraging people to utilize our walkways, expanding people outdoors so you could do that. Adding Wi-Fi to downtown and other green spaces. That would be, again, making it available for people to go outside and be able to access that. To what was mentioned regarding broadband, I would say that it was in a meeting with the governor as it pertained to eligibility, especially with those who receive direct funding, was to just hit a pause on broadband. Still have the conversations, but hit a pause because the state is working on a statewide plan regarding broadband that I believe will also include identifying where are the target areas and having a great report so you can access what's our weaknesses, where's our vulnerabilities within our community. We do not know that currently. I did have Brian meet with Spectrum, for example, regarding access to that. I don't know, Brian, do you want to add anything regarding what that meeting was?
Yeah, sure. It was a very informative meeting, just looking at some of the things that the private sector is doing around partnering with municipalities or nonprofits to expand access. I think it's definitely in light of some of the funding opportunities. I think it's something that would be interesting, and we're still continuing to explore it here at the city. I'm not sure that we still need to do some more due diligence about how it would impact some of our hardest to reach areas because we are such a unique city in terms of the land mass that we have and some of the outlying areas, specifically in the south. So definitely very promising, and in there it's a proposal that's expanding all throughout Maine, and could be and could eliminate some of, I think, some of the cost barriers, specifically to some of our downtown communities. So
What I was hoping we'd see is a map, right? Here's a map, and here's where they're reaching, here's where they're not. That's when you're dealing with a public-private partnership, you don't necessarily get that information. So it wasn't something, in my mind, it seemed like it would be really easy. Show me where we don't have broadband and how can we get it there. We have infrastructure already built in as a city because we're already accessing all of our current infrastructure buildings, schools. We're already doing that. If there's a way that we could tie into that to expand that use, then this would have been a great opportunity, but it's just not available. And so I think we're gonna need to wait on the state's connectivity plan and be able to really take a look at that and see what we need to do for Auburn. Complete Riverwalk Loop, Council Walker already talked about this. This is part of that. Light Falls to enhance river as an attraction. That would be a tourism opportunity for you. Create a play area, splash park, and anniversary park. Again, that's creating recreational activity. Improved skate park and add lighting. This was in Moulton Field, and improving that so there'd be more outdoor activities and recreational use. So those were the areas that were listed on the strategic plan. Now there was a lot more in the strategic plan. Not all of those met the requirements of ARPA. These are the ones that we believe, with some language and working through the language, could meet that eligibility requirement.
Phil, what do you think? I mean, obviously, you vetted this these are doable with ARPA funds. Do you think this would get us at, what, 30, 40% of some of the goals and strategies outlined in the strategic plan? Have we looked at that, or?
Yeah, I think it would easily meet that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So within a year and a half, 2 years, this ARPA money can jumpstart the strategic plan completion significantly.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe
That's
so.
good.
Yeah.
Is there any, so basically something we just did for everything beforehand, is there any issues, any problems, any clarification needed on the quality goal 5 bullet points that Phil outlined?
I guess the question I have is, it says a lot about downtown, but we have a lot of outlying areas that have parks in them, as well as we've got East Auburn, it has a tennis court that hasn't been used in years, and pickleball has been a very highly used sport, and they're always looking for places to go, and yet we've got a place out there that nobody seems to want to put any money in. That definitely needs to be looked at. It's a double court. It could be used. Many people would use it for pickleball if it was resurfaced and make it available. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a partner deal.
Well, we are
or
having
not.
conversations. Part of that, as you know, part of that is part of the land, water, and conservation funding that was allocated as part of that. However, we did get a green light based off the work that we've done so far regarding some of the requirements. We have gotten a green light to go ahead and apply for funds under land, water, and conservation. As many of you, we've talked about this before, but for the public to know, a good portion of the state of Maine communities were non-eligible because of projects that were started back in the 70s, 80s, were never really carried over and were not maintained, or there were some boundary issues, especially when schools expanded. Some of that property boundary lines moved and then made communities ineligible. We're now eligible to apply, and Council Walker, that is probably one of the first projects we're applying for, is regarding that tennis court, to resurface, be able to use it, and you're right, specifically for pickleball, because that's probably one of the higher demands for our senior community, active senior community needs. And so, but that opens the door up, just so you know, that opens the door up for future applications, based off from land water conservation funding that's now allocated. It's a mandatory allocation every year from the federal government to states to then make those available, funds available to the community. We're now eligible to continue applying for those, and we will.
So, I mean, how does everybody feel right now with kind of this rough list? Because I'm going to propose something to help speed this along in a minute. How does everybody feel with this list that we generated tonight, based upon counselor feedback, as well that's been collaborated and kind of pulled from the strategic plan?
Can I ask one question, just in terms of inclusion on quality goal 5? Is there any discussion about Museum LA?
Yeah, I'll take that. I had a long talk with the board of directors about a month and a half ago, before they hired their new executive director, about Museum LA and helping to fund Museum LA from City ARPA, along with county and City of Lewiston to jumpstart their capital campaign to get going. Very well received. I'm still very bullish on the idea. We do need some coordination, and that will hopefully come as our new executive director gets settled into her position and they start working on presenting something. I also did forward them off to look at the state for ARPA funds as well to help further. So we are working with them a little bit, at least in an informal way, but I'd love it to be more formal. But it's not just Auburn. It needs to be more partners to leverage.
Right, and that leads me to, is there any, I know there's discussion in terms of the county, is there any discussion in terms of leveraging funds with Lewiston around some of these projects, particularly around the river?
So
Phil, you want to say that politically correctly?
Lewiston was part of our regional meetings. Lewiston has already allocated their funds to projects. I think it's still important to bring them into our regional discussions. It doesn't mean that they can't go back and reappropriate some of their funds, because again, these dollars do not need to be allocated until 2024, but it did kind of redirect what we're able to do collaboratively with the county when they just allocated all their funds already.
Okay, thank you.
Phil said it very, very well better than I would have. Thank you, Phil. So, that brings me to this suggestion. Oh, Belinda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know of all the great works that Museum LA is doing, but we've already given them like 50,000. I know it's a drop in the bucket. If we're giving Museum LA, which is semi-based mostly in Lewiston, then why aren't we doing it for Little Theater? Why aren't we giving them funds?
It wasn't really that. It was really to have them explore what they needed to actually jumpstart their capital campaign and how they could leverage potential municipal funds and to see if they could put together a proposal to bring in front of council. So there's no talk with them. I wanted them to propose this to council for your feedback, along with the Lewiston's council and the county commission as well.
Well, couldn't a Little Theater do the similar
Anybody
thing?
can. Anybody
Put
can.
a capital plan and come in front of us?
As
and
long
propose
as
it?
somehow it's justified with under the Treasury guidelines of ARPA expenditures. Like Phil said earlier, yeah, anybody can. So that's, there's a lot of great ideas, I think, here. I don't think anyone really wants to take anything away. There's an old tried and true, actually, we use this with the strategic plan itself, which is basically quadrant prioritization, which is looking at all these programs or projects with regards to high return on investment, low investment, okay, high workload, low workload, high return, and so forth, basically 4 different quadrants. What I'd like to do is I'd like to form an ad hoc committee that is comprised of 2 counselors, myself, and staff, to look at all these opportunities and start putting them into some sort of organizational plan to present to council for approval and or modification at a latter point, ideally before November. I think that would be important. We have a lot of things here. I think it's important to have council representation. So what I'd like to put on the agenda for next meeting is for the council to nominate and vote on their 2 members to be on this mayoral ad hoc committee. Very similar in scope to what Councilor Boss and Councilor McLeod did with permitting. Okay, working it, making sure everything's there, making sure the intent of the councils is taken, and then present back to council. Make sense? Questions on that?
I have a couple questions. So one, you didn't want to present anything outwardly without coming to council. Is there any mechanism to get feedback into here, because we came up with great ideas, but there might be ideas that we haven't come up with or haven't thought of. I mean, just as I'm looking through, like electrical vehicle charging infrastructure is something I think the city could benefit from, but it's not on the list yet. You know what I mean? So I just want to make sure.
Do you want to put it on the list?
Yes, I do. I absolutely
Okay,
do.
then
But
That's it, going once, going twice. Yeah.
But that's my point, is that there are some things, as part of your quadrant analysis, I would also like to see the ability to leverage funds, because while it might be a lower priority, if right now we're able to leverage more funding to get something done, it spreads that wealth further. What was the other thing I had? Oh, the question about getting it done before November. Is the intent for that to allocate a percentage before the end of this council, or is it?
Not necessarily, more so just to get at least a rough idea and some organizational structure behind it.
Okay.
Just to say, okay, this is what we're doing, this is kind of how we're looking at the funds, and, this makes sense, and this could, probably great idea, but we couldn't get it obligated before 2024.
Gotcha.
So, okay, now might have to put that aside. Or we're at $21 million of potential projects, how are we gonna prioritize that? Or $7 million, what else? Something like, just so we can now start getting it in. And, we have staff here, but I'd like to get council involved, and let's put this together and try to get it out in the next couple of months. I think, just looking and listening to what everybody's saying tonight, and looking at what staff and Phil's put together, we've got some amazing programs here. I don't know exactly how to quantify it, but have a significant return on investment that will actually become really economically sustainable, culturally sustainable, build connectivity, and really hit a lot of things in our strategic goal, which is well thought out. So I think we didn't plan it, but the strategic planning process happening when it did was extremely helpful for us. So, and as we keep going, I think more ideas are going to come, and this is by no means a done final list that we present to council in November. It's just directional and probably a living document that can be modified at any time. Okay, just a way to keep going on the next step.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What if you gave us at least till the weekend for
Maybe
our
your
council?
microphone closer.
What if you gave us at least to the weekend to come up with a proposal? That way, I mean, like you said, a lot of these are great ideas, but when we go home after listening and digesting this, one of us that haven't said anything may come up with something. So if you give us at least to the weekend, we can put that on the table as well for the new committee.
There's a never ending, there's no deadline here.
No, but if you end up forming a committee to flesh out what we've already talked about.
Yeah, no, there's no deadline. You can add anything you want at any time.
Okay.
This is a work in progress. There's no deadline. So,
Well, that's good to know then.
yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Any other questions on that? You'll see it on the September 20th, and, we'll try to get some communication out, Phil and I, to the council for nominations, who wants to be there, and you all will vote on your 2 members. Fair enough? Okay. Is there anything else on this topic? Phil, do you have anything to wrap up with?
No, I would just, I like what I heard regarding no deadline. I think that's helpful, because I think as we move forward, as Councilor McLeod said, the opportunity to leverage these dollars towards other dollars that we believe are coming is going to be important. And so we know we have staff that are monitoring other funds that are coming, especially as it pertains to transportation. We're looking at those dollars, how we can leverage that. But I think we also need to, and I can talk with the superintendent, I think it'll be beneficial to connect with the school department as well, because they have dollars that they're working towards. I did not include those education goals that were listed in the strategic plan, because I'm not sure what they're doing. So we need to maybe circle with them, and maybe that's something the committee can do to try to bring that in, to make sure we're tying into how is the school leveraging those dollars they've received.
Absolutely. Okay. That's it. Very good then. Well, this is exciting. I think this is going to be truly, again, like we talked about at the beginning, do something that's truly transformative for the community, and not just Auburn, but the entire region itself. And I think that anything that we plan on doing here is going to be a benefit to the entire county, and that's important. So we'll move on to the next workshop item, which is Barker Mills Lewiston Falls project. Is that Auburn Falls? The Auburn Falls project, Mr. Eric Cousins. I have to rename that. It's all about the brand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. That project was named in the last relicensing, but that's something we might be able to work on this time. We've been through sort of a lull in hydropower relicensing work over the last year. The last really substantive comments we had were for the Upper Barker update in mid-2019. On that facility, we now know that they will be setting the licensing process for the remainder of that process. We'll see a schedule fairly soon. For the current round of comments on the Upper Barker project, staff plans to reiterate the comments that we put together in 2019, just to keep them sort of near the top of the record, so they're still familiar with the people that are doing the reviews. And also talk one more time with the Conservation Commission, just make sure there's not something that's changed that we should add to those comments, and we'll try to file those in September before the deadline. The big one and the main reason for giving you guys an update is that Brookfield is about to start the relicensing process for the Monty Hydro Lewiston Falls project here on the main stem of the river. Much larger project than the Barker Mill projects, upper or lower. Those projects sometimes struggle to return a profit in any given year. This is a much more profitable facility, impacts a larger river. It's at the center of the two communities, Lewiston and Auburn. And we think that a really robust stakeholder process during that and early involvement of FERC staff will be important to make sure that we look at all the issues and that the communities can get the recreational or environmental benefits that that make up for the impacts that the facility causes to the river and the surrounding residents. Having a dammed river is different than having a naturally flowing river. And the FERC process is the way to make sure that those things are considered. The potential of the river, especially around recreation, is considered, and that they mitigate for those impacts. Much like the discussion that you just had, we are finding that the comprehensive plan, strategic plan in particular, new Auburn master plan, and some of the other plans that we already have in place that either you or prior councils had reviewed, really give us the groundwork to be able to put together basic comments. But over the next year, we'll be checking in a lot more with you and the Conservation Commission, potentially the Planning Board, on formulating comments on each step of that process. We did have to make a decision on whether or not the sort of easier, lower intensity process that Brookfield was asking for, the traditional licensing process. We had to file those comments by last week on the 4th. We received the notice a bit late from Brookfield that comment period was starting and we weren't able to get in front of the council. But we have talked with a number of other stakeholders. Most facilities use the integrated licensing process. It's more intensive. I tried to provide the materials in the packet so you could see why there are advantages to using that. It is more intensive for staff and the city to keep all the schedules. It's more intensive for the applicant. But it allows FERC to weigh in earlier and more often throughout the process and is a better process for involving all stakeholders. So we have asked FERC to consider requiring that. And when they make a decision on that over the next 30 to 60 days, we'll also be looking for feedback to provide comments on the actual pre-application document that details sort of what they think the issues are around the project. But I think with the integrated licensing process, there's more opportunity for studies to identify needs that maybe we're not aware of yet that hit on our larger goals, and then to advocate for those through the process. So really looking to just give you an update. Any feedback is welcome. We do plan on talking to the Conservation Commission at their next meeting. They've requested that and provided good feedback in the Barker process, so we will try to do that for their September meeting.
Eric, will you be able to talk to the Recreation Committee as well on this?
We certainly can.
Yeah, or at least electronically.
Yep.
And all this information, you know, I just think it's important too that we look at some of the specifics on the FERC relicensing with the lower and the upper Barker, because that might come into play with the ARPA money as well. You know, with time releases per se, should we be looking at, you know, carry in, carry out, kayak access between the upper and the lower, or more trail bike networks up there in order to take advantage of what you've already negotiated? Because if memory serves me correctly, you finished that after the strategic plan was complete.
We finish the lower Barker after.
Right.
And there's a lot at stake with a 30 to 40-year license. I mean, this is once in a lifetime for us to impact the recreational facilities that this dam hydropower facility can provide. And there may be a need for some legal assistance in the process because we're dealing with consultants and a company that owns major hydropower facilities throughout the world. And this is what they do every day. And we're trying to participate as stakeholders. Some help may be necessary for advice in the process.
Any other questions for Eric on this, Counselor?
Just, I really support working with the Conservation Commission because there's some historical knowledge in that group, having gone through this process, the previous process, that could be really helpful.
Any other comments? Any other comments for Eric? Questions? Approximately how much longer for the entire process to be complete?
So the Lewiston Falls Monte Hydro expires in 2026. They'll expect to get through the process in late 2025, early 2026 before that expiration. Both of the Barker licenses ended up dragging on, though, beyond the deadline, so that's a potential, too.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, then, Mr. Cousins. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Once in a lifetime. This is your third time doing this, or going to be your second, third?
Once on each facility.
Once on each. Well, perfect. Outstanding. Next on the list, we have a presentation by Phil and Sue, our city clerk, on changes to the charter.
Mayor and council, before I have Sue go through, and she added in a timeline for you, one thing that I'm going to recommend after talking with Sue and after looking at some of the deadlines to be able to post and make information available, because there's not a lot of major changes within the charter, I'm going to recommend that we go ahead as a council, we'll present to you. You can make those recommendations, have public hearing, but push this off to the June special election and not try to get this done before November. Again, these are very minor, but for us to hit some of these deadline requirements just makes it really difficult. The more that we move into October, the more difficult it's going to be for Sue to try to get this on a ballot. We have the language, it's being vetted through legal currently, but my concern is we're going to miss one of these deadlines, and by doing so, we're going to try to put something on a ballot that really is not going to be able to, and we want to make sure there's good public process and that they have a good opportunity to weigh in on these. Again, nothing here is, you've seen the recommendations, you've already reviewed them, but nothing here major. So that's why I don't see any real desire to try to get it in on November. If as a council you want it by November, we'll hold special meetings. It's going to require special meetings by you to do that, but we can make that happen. But we'd have to make sure we're advertising the public hearing, determine whether or not the public hearing can be done on a separate night than what you vote on. Some of that's all what's going to be required. But Sue can talk through some of that, but I just wanted to throw that out there as Sue and I talked about that this evening. Is just, it seems like not rushing it and try to get it in on June is probably the better method. So Sue, do you want to add some things?
Just, the timeline, if you do want this on the November ballot, we missed the deadline to hold the public hearing tonight. So I would have to submit the notice to the Sun Journal tomorrow. So it would appear on Thursday the 9th. And then the public hearing would have to be on September 16th, which is on a Thursday. And then council would vote on the 20th, at the meeting of the 20th, to put this on the November ballot. And even that's going to be cutting it close because I've already submitted the ballot content for the municipal officers. So it would be cutting it close for absentee ballots to get here on time. They may be able to do it, but it could be they could come in a little bit late.
So let's talk about this real quick. I think you're looking for a decision from the council at this point. Folks, do you see any need to push this into the November ballot, or will the June 2022 ballot suffice? Yes. Considering the recommended changes are, yeah, September, June?
Yep.
June?
I just have one question about that. It would be the special election in June. Do we typically see almost 3,000 voters come out to that?
Well, I did go back to the last 3 gubernatorial primary elections, and they ranged anywhere between 16 and 30%. So they've averaged about 24% turnout. And that's going back to 2010.
Okay.
But the primaries are probably about the same turnout as a municipal election.
Okay.
Okay, good. Any objection to moving this over to June?
The only thing that I don't like about it is, come June, there'll be a whole different election here in November, and we're gonna lose half of our councilors we have.
Happens every 2 years. That's why you probably will see me propose a whole new charter commission between now and June.
Between November and June.
Between November and June, just to be honest and fair.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the problem that I see with it.
Yeah.
If we push it to November, it'll be us here that makes that
And
decision.
you're absolutely justifying the whole concept of staggered terms, because of legacy knowledge. So, we have any other objections to June? None? Okay, I think we have, through inaction, on special meetings, we'll just naturally push it out till June. Okay?
But if they're such minor changes, I mean, basically, the only changes I know of correcting a few words or the school committee stuff.
It's all about rushing and not giving proper notice for the public hearings. I mean, we have literally a 1-week window to make sure everybody's informed, and we have a good turnout so people can actually voice their opinion. And that's important, especially with you, Counselor.
Right.
You talk about that quite a bit, so I wouldn't want to see us rushing it.
Oh, no, I'm not, but I'm
Okay.
just saying it was such a minor thing.
Some might be minor to one person, but it might be major to someone else. It's hard to assume. So June it is, I think, through inaction. Okay. Very good. Is there anything else on that topic? If not, I'm going to put this workshop in recess, actually end it. We'll reconvene in 20 minutes for our normal city council meeting. Thank you very much. Here for the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening, folks. Thanks for joining us. We're going to start off tonight with our consent items. We have 4 consent items on the agenda. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Good. Motion, Councilor McLeod, second, Councilor Milks. Asked by a vote of show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? None being. Consent item agenda passes by a vote of 7-0. Next are the minutes of the August 16th, 2021 regular city council meeting. Are there any corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the August 16th, 2021.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Walker, second by Councilor McLeod. All those in favor? Passes 7-0. Now on to communications, presentations, and recognitions. First communication we have is a proclamation, and that is, if you just give me a second to pull it up, for World Refugee Day. Hold on one second. I'd like to read this out to everybody so we have it. There we go. Is it on the screen? No. Got it. Very good. World Refugee Day proclamation. Whereas the World Refugee Day was launched by the United Nations to honor the bravery, strength, and determination of refugees fleeing war and persecution. And whereas refugees and communities across the welcoming state of Maine resettle in the hopes of finding peace and safety for themselves and their families. And whereas refugee communities from diverse backgrounds, with a variety of skills, abilities, and experiences have been and continue to be woven in the fabric of Maine's vibrant cultural tapestry throughout our state's 200-year history. And whereas refugee-led organizations in Maine share in the priority of our state to strengthen communities by engaging with and improving the lives of all Mainers. And whereas all of Maine's communities are hoping to stay strong together as we recover for a time of uncertainty reminiscent of experiences in the diaspora. Now, therefore, I, Jason Levesque, Mayor of Auburn, do hereby proclaim September 16th, 2021 to be World Refugee Day in Auburn, Maine, and recognize the positive impact and enduring contributions of refugee communities seeking refuge within Maine's borders. As of this day, August 16th, 2021. Now, next, we have council communications. I'll start with the council. Council, any communications from anyone here sitting on my right? Councilor Carrier.
None.
Councilor Walker?
None.
Gary?
None at this time, thank
Councilor
you.
Milks?
Not at this time?
McLeod?
There's one more place to get pizza in Ward 2. A pizza place is reopened in my ward, so.
No, please say that into the microphone loudly.
I said the pizza place in Ward 2 has reopened
Pizza Market.
after being a month closed for renovation, so we can now get pizzas and calzones locally.
And they do deliver.
At Pizza Market?
Pizza Market. Councilor?
None.
Councilor Boss?
Nothing for me, thank you.
I've got some communication here that I'd like to share with everybody. This is from, I received a letter in August from the Lake Auburn Community Center. In general, and I'm going to provide electronic version, which I now have. I've given a paper copy to the city manager, to the clerk, to post in the minutes for this meeting. But the Lake Auburn Community Center is requesting the acquisition by the City of Auburn of its historic barn and North Auburn Road for restoration as a community building as well as surrounding property. This property provides public access to a multitude of recreational activities in the Lake Auburn area and is an advantageous location as the city contemplates future activities in the area. As you know, this is the Lake Auburn Community Center on North Auburn Road, the old barn, volleyball courts, community center. Edward Little and Lewiston are currently practicing and I believe playing volleyball at the site. It also provides access to Lake Auburn, hiking trails, snowmobile trails, and the cities of Lewiston and Auburn Municipal Tree Farm. There's a lot of other aspects as well. Bottom line is, and I'm going to summarize this 3-page letter, but I want you all to look at it in preparation for a future workshop. This would be a city recreational spot located in North Auburn. It would allow us to expand the amount of land we have that we're protecting within the Lake Auburn watershed, as well as provide some great recreational opportunities for the entire city. So I will make sure this gets out to you by tomorrow and it gets posted to the website. And I'll work with the city manager on scheduling a workshop with this group here at City Council in the next month or two. It's more of, you can have it as long as you invest in it and make sure that it's open to the public, okay? So, and there's some specifics and some ambiguity here as well, but we can get down to that during our workshop. That's my communication. I'm going to turn it over to the city manager.
Nothing to add.
Okay, we're going to move on then. Open session. We're going to open this up for the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. Please step forth to the podium, state your name, address, and if you could, keep your comments to roughly around 3 minutes.
Evening, everyone. I'm Mike Farrell, 67 years old, 70% disabled, veteran of the U.S. Army. I used to live at 145 Eastman Lane, but because of the actions of the council and staff, I'm currently homeless. I have had 2 of my properties seized. I have a family of 5 living at one of them who has been told they have to be out by the 13th. I have a couple of contractors that have been renting from me for years in my barn at 1865 Hotel Road. Depression sucks, folks. Depression really sucks. It's been very difficult for me. Some mornings I don't even want to get out of bed. Not your fault. I realize that I have been an ongoing issue for the city council and staff for several years. You now have taken possession of both of my properties, and essentially I have nothing. I can't even get my tools. My credit is going to be destroyed. I came here a week late, well, downstairs, to pay my taxes and was told that they wouldn't accept my money because staff had told them not to. I came with enough money to pay my taxes in full at that time, $25,000. Been robbed a couple of times in the last year. Again, that's not your problem. It's not your fault. If anything, I've kind of done this to myself. And I realize that now you own my properties. And you can tell me to go screw, or whatever it is that you feel is the right thing to do, but I don't think that you're really that kind of people, and I'm not going to sit here and beg. I'm not going to vilify anybody, because you know what? Over the years, as you know, I have had opportunities to change this. I just couldn't mentally get there. I currently have a contractor, Jesse Childs, who was supposed to be here tonight but couldn't do it due to a family emergency. He has done a very great deal of cleanup at 1865 Hotel Road. That property no longer looks like a junkyard. There's still a few cars there. That's the last part of what he's doing. And there is a small pile of rubble, but it is nothing compared to what it was. My property at Eastman Lane, he's going to start on next week, if you folks allow him to. It will be at no cost to the city. It has cost me $10,000 to clean up the property at Hotel Road in the hopes that you would see your way clear to allow my tenants to continue to live there. They've got 3 kids. They've got a couple of wonderful dogs, a cat, and 3 little miniature goats. They did nothing wrong. I've got 2 contractors that rent bays in that chicken barn down there. They've done nothing wrong. This is all on me. I am just in hopes that we can work together. I don't want to lose everything that I've worked for the last 40 years, and that's the way it is right now. Every single thing that I've worked for is gone.
Mr. Farrell, thank you. And if you want action done by the council on a specific topic, we recommend through process is that you reach out and ensure that you have two councils that support whatever action that might be, so they can bring it on forth to a new agenda item.
I have reached out to my counselors, and they've been busy apparently and haven't reached back out to me, so.
And I'll keep encouraging you, as the
Unless,
councilors can bring something.
I would hope that happens soon in the future, because I would very much like to be up in front of the council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farrell.
And in the meantime, I'd really like to have a place to lay my head down.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farrell.
Okay. And I'm not going to stay for the rest of the meeting because it's a little rough on me right now.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, folks, for listening.
Is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak during tonight's first open session?
Hello, I'm Dr. Susan Stanford, and after hearing him, wow. I'm the one that had my life destroyed by Berman and Simmons, and now because of the financial downfall, the denial of health care, I'm now disabled, living off of $862 a month. $100,000 education totally destroyed, and I'm devastated. So right now I have an issue. I went through the weatherization program. Didn't know till things fell apart at my house that they never obtained a electrical permit. So now I have electrical issues. I've had the electrical inspector in, the building inspector in. I'm in touch with Community Concepts, but the bottom line is there was grant money available for the electricity. I was made to take out a loan through the City of Auburn in order to get the weatherization grant program. So I have letters for you guys, and we have a secretary here that I can hand these off to. The bottom line is I'm fighting back for my reputation. I'm already in touch with the federal government in the grants things, and I understand what you're doing with grants, but if it all comes back on you and you lose your grants, so be it. Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak at tonight's first open session?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rudy Wing. I own 499 Penley Corner Road. I've been over there for 18 years, trying to develop a program for veterans and families and at-risk kids in the community. But through complications of the person prior to me that purchased the property, they didn't complete the transfer, so I had to battle with Lewiston Auburn Public Waste Authority to get my septic and my parcel 2 back, which has been done. It took 8 years to go through that process to get the leasee to release it, so I finally got that done. Just like that veteran that just left, I'm one step from homelessness. That used to be a very historical church there before it burnt in 2013. The property was established in the early 1800s. Mainers mustered there, got their weapons, went down and fought the Civil War. There's quite a bit of history to that piece of property. Unfortunately, in 5 nights before Christmas in 2013, I lost it all in a fire along with my whole life's career in carpentry, all my tools, everything. So it's been a long struggle to come back since 2013. And I'm back now to be able to continue and pursue forward to assist helping transitioning veterans back into the community by way of education and by farming. Over in Auburn, where I'm at, by Fox Ridge Golf Course, Obviously, we have quite a few acres out there of agricultural property. My intention is to work with the veteran farms that I have out there, which I have. I have them in Poland. I've got about 50 veteran farms that I deal with United Farmers Veterans of Maine. But one of the things that they struggle with is the distribution of products that they grow. They can't get rid of the majority of their yield. They end up grinding it back into the earth and going to the next season. So one of the things that I propose, and I've done my homework, I've been up to Togus and I've talked to my cafeteria folks up there from both the doctors and nurses side and then the patient side. There's 2 different cafeterias up there. And they'd love to have fresh vegetables from veteran farms in my community. So that being said, that's the business of what I'm going to try and build over there. The other part of the process is education. And if you're going to hook a veteran coming back from service, you got to think about what that cat's coming back, or that gal's coming back into. He's going to come back into kids, dogs, farm, bills, this, that, and this other. Well, hey, I mean, I did that. I got lucky. My brother was getting out of the carpentry, and a gentleman needed a helper, and I went into the carpentry trade, which I've built 40 years of a career with. And I've helped a lot of veterans along the way, but part of it's the education side of things that I want to produce out there for veterans. If you go to United Farmers Veterans, you go on and you'll see that up in Troy, Maine, we had a veteran that had a farmhouse falling down around him. And I took it upon myself as a carpenter and a fellow veteran to go up there to help this veteran get into a safe house, which we did. Thankfully, we did, because halfway through the process, when we were ready to switch the water over, another veteran that was volunteering came to the project, came up from the basement, said, "Rudy, it stinks down there. I got a headache." So I went down in there, and sure enough, there was a cracked case inside the furnace. And if we hadn't have been there to do that remodel job, that veteran wouldn't be here today, because he just would have turned his furnace off and went to sleep. So those are the types of things that I'm involved with. I'm trying to do the education, bring the education around. We're going to do some agricultural stuff out there, deliver some fresh vegetables and meats to Togus. I have a racing program that I'm involved in.
Well, sir, I'm sorry, Rudy, if I could, and thank you, this is all great. As a veteran myself, I'm very, very appreciative. Just we're going over time, is there a specific issue that you wanted to state to the council?
Yes.
For consideration?
I'm out there since 2013, and I'm using a generator, 3 to be exact. There's one in the RV. There's another one that has to run the well. I've gone through 2 pumps. I have to pump my sewer from the tank itself. It's a pump station, so I have to pump that up to my septic tank. Then I have to pump water into my camper. Okay, then I dump my sewer to the tank, which I had to get done because I had people were reporting me for dumping sewer on the ground. So now my system is all together, and it has to work. I have to run my systems. When the church was there, I had power. I can't even get temporary power from the City of Auburn for me to live, basically. I have a diesel pusher in that yard. I'm here, been trying to help this community with kids and veterans in this community, and I've had nothing but a struggle from day one since I bought the place in 2004. A lot of things have happened.
Well, Rudy, I'm sorry, but we're over time, but just the crux of it is your address, you're zoned for residential or non-residential?
It's agricultural, but
okay.
It's you know, this place was here before this city was established. It's early 1800s. It's in the history books in our library, and I don't want this piece of property to go away. I want it to serve. My intention is for this property to carry forward. I'm 61 years old. When I hit the bricks and go toes up, this place is going to continue serving veterans here in the state of Maine that can come here and get answers from veteran on veteran.
Rudy?
That's what I want to build there.
Sir, what we'll do is we'll look at this with staff. Thank you very much. We understand. I mean, your problem is you can't live in your property because it's not zoned for you to live there. It's agriculture. We understand that issue.
I can understand that, but at least, I mean, you can give me a simple human right of power, and I need to have some power. It's just that I got wells, I got septic systems there. I paid full tab on that place in taxes up to 213. And then when the fire happened and I was a mess, you turn around and you tell me now it's a non-conforming lot. You took my $45,000 value away. So all I'm saying is, those common sense things that people need in this community, like water and electricity, basic needs should be covered. I don't care if these rules tell us that our lots aren't big enough. This place was here before this place was here, okay? We're talking Civil War era, and it's a great piece of property, and I've been told that it's non-conforming. Great, but the fact of the matter is, people have lived there, pastors have lived there, everybody's lived there with their families. It had a kitchen down cellar, and everybody says, I can't live there. I got people to the right, I got people to the left. But I keep getting it crammed up my butt that it's, since the church is gone, I can't do nothing.
Sir,
You've lost your value, Rudy.
So thank you very much. We are over time, but what we'll do is we're going to keep you informed of when this comes up, this topic. Will come up in front of council over the next several months, okay? And we'll work with staff to see if we can get you a resolution.
Well, I hope you can do it a lot quicker than the several months, because I've been doing this since 2013 with generators and whatnot. So think about waking up, flushing your toilet, and going out and have to start a generator to pump it up to your tank.
Will do, sir. Thank you. Is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak during tonight's first open comment? None being? I'll now close the first open session and move on to...
Mr. Mayor? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could the kind gentleman that spoke in open session please leave his detailed information, point of contact number? Okay.
I have it.
So that we can discuss this tomorrow or the next day with our planning and permitting and code.
We have all of
Well,
that.
we have everything.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, we're moving on to unfinished business. Tonight, we have no unfinished business. We're now going to move on to new business. First is resolved 0209072021.
When he gets done.
Supporting the creation of the Ad Hoc Public Safety Building Committee. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a motion for Councilor McLeod, second for Councilor Milks. I'm going to open this up to the public for comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? If so, please step up to the podium. Seeing none, I'll bring this back to the council. I'll lead it off with you, Mr. Manager. Just to reiterate, this was discussed during a workshop last meeting. Phil, would you like to say something?
No, I think, as you'll see in the resolve, this is to create a citizen, staff, and council ad hoc committee. The work that will be outlined has been listed within the resolve. About 21 members will serve on this. And we do have a timeline on getting this work done and completed and back to the council for consideration.
Is there any other debate? Anybody want to speak in opposition to this?
I have a question. Is there any way to, and again, this might not be, is there any way to amend the membership so that the 2 members of city council are able to stay on until February 1st as members?
Councilor McLeod, you can actually make that motion to amend this?
No, I'm asking if that has the ability to be done.
It does?
Does
You
that
can
end
do
at that point?
You can pretty much do anything you want through Robert's rules. So, but yes, you may make a motion to do that would carry on. Okay, is there any other questions, comments? None being? I'm going to ask for a vote. Councilor McLeod? I'm going to ask for a vote. All those in favor of the resolution? Please raise your hand. All those in opposition? None being? It passes by a vote of 7-0.
Mr. Mayor?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The good Councilor Walker would like a suspension of the rules under new business to add an agenda item.
I have a motion on the floor to suspend the rules. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Walker. All those in favor of suspending the rules? All those opposed?
Just for clarification, Councilor Gary made the motion.
Councilor Walker seconded.
Okay. Her wording was that Councilor Walker is requesting
Okay,
a suspension
but
of rules.
it's Councilor Gary made the motion, Councilor
Just wanna
Walker
make sure
seconded the
it's clear.
motion to suspend the rules. All those in favor again, please, show of hands. Opposed? 5-1. We are now suspending the rules. Is there any new business that would like to be brought forth to this council this time?
Yes, I would like to For the next agenda, I guess it is, that we have the meeting set for the charter to move forward. I would like us to have whatever the next meeting has to be. I don't know the date at this point, September something, 9th,
September 16th.
16th. And I'd like to move it forward that we have that meeting, because I really feel that this needs to be moved forward so that we can be ready to vote in November.
So I have a motion on the floor right now to move the meeting, or, excuse me, to have a special meeting on September 16th? Or would that be September 13th, which is Monday?
It would be the 16th,
It would have to be on the 16th.
yes, because of the timing of the public notice.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor for a special meeting to be held on September 16th, with the sole agenda item being the review of the, or public hearing with regards to charter changes. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second from Councilor Gary. I'm going to open this up. Beforehand, as some of you might not have realized, during the workshop, we have several small charter review changes, or charter changes, during our review process. We have to be able to put public notice in for a public hearing, and have that public hearing, and for us to vote to send this to ballot no later than September 17th, in order for the ballots to be effectively printed for this November's election. It was deemed through inaction that we would push the charter review out to the June election of 2022. So we have Councilor Walker and Councilor Gary who would like to move that to a special meeting next week. So with that said, just so we are all aware of what's going on, is there anybody who would like to speak in support of this motion? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We worked hard on the charter. It got sent to the charter revisions. It got sent to our lawyer, since we as a council didn't get any amendments to the parts that affect directly the city council or the city councilors. The school department, when they reviewed the charter, they came up with a couple minor housekeeping word clarifications. Because of that, I think that we should move it forward, vote it, to keep it clean. I do not support sending it to, putting it in the lap of another council and sending it to a June election because I don't think it was so cool that you said that if we do move it off, that you're going to set up a whole new charter commission. That's not so cool, because you didn't get a lot of things that
Councilor
you
Gary,
needed.
I mean, are you saying, okay, so this is because what I said wasn't quote-unquote cool. Fair enough. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this? Councilor?
I do agree that we spent time and came forward with the information, and it was, I think, well vetted by the committee. It's unfortunate that it would squeeze the city to get this on the ballot, and I'm sorry that that is the case, because if it weren't squeezing the city to try and get this done, then I would vote to move it forward. But unfortunately, I don't want it to be an issue for community input, not being able to have community input.
Is there anybody else that would like to, Councilor Boss?
For those who are here who are not participating in the workshop, can we have City Manager Kroll explain the impact potentially on the absentee ballots if we were to try to get this in to be added to the ballot?
Sue, do you want to address that?
Yeah, it could potentially impact the, when we receive the absentee ballots, you know, it's possible that we need to have them here in-house by October 1st. So it's cutting it really close. I did reach out to our vendor to ask if they would be able to guarantee that the ballots would be here by October 1st. They said they couldn't, you know, because it's so late in the game. We'll certainly do whatever we can to try to get those ballots on time, but there's no guarantee. And, you know, you could potentially disenfranchise some voters if they were to come in on, you know, the first week of October to vote, and those ballots weren't available.
And what's the requirement for having absentee ballots available prior to the election day? Is it 30 days?
30 days,
And the
yes.
election is on November
2nd.
So that's very,
30 days.
very close.
Yeah, and to clarify, remember, at any time, the council can vote to form a charter commission, okay, at any time. That can actually happen. Then the city can elect charter commission reviews, okay? What you bring up, though, is to get things done every 2 years before the end of the session because you're going to lose X amount of counselors is an inherent problem with having set 2-year non-staggered terms. I think that's why if you look at other municipalities that have staggered terms, you always keep some of that legacy knowledge versus risking losing it. So, you know, I just want to make sure that since good counselor thought what I said wasn't cool, I wanted, you know, her to make sure she understood that at any time a council can do that. Actually, and the mayor cannot. Anybody else want to talk about this? Councilor McLeod.
I just have a clarifying question. What is in reality the difference for us putting it forward in an order before the end of our term to have it on the June election versus pushing it through now to put it on the November? Is there any functional difference between the two?
So as was stated by Councilor Gary, there was small word language that was corrected within the charter as it pertains to the city, and then there was language pertaining to the hiring and firing of a superintendent. However, the charter is not in alignment with the state of Maine law. That means state law would trump our charter. So we're putting language in that would refer back to state law regarding the hiring and firing. If any action was to take place regarding a superintendent, it would still go back to the state law. It'll trump our charter. Our charter has language that says, as well as this language is in effect as long as it's in compliance with state statute. So there really is no impact other than, I think as Councilor Gary or Councilor Walker might have mentioned in the workshop, was that there was a process, it was laid out, we are moving forward in that process. This would create a longer delay in that process. So if the council would like to move forward with this, we are perfectly good with that. I think that what could take place is, as the clerk had mentioned regarding the ballots coming in time, we will do everything we can to make that happen. The language has all been vetted through the attorney. They have the language. We can go to press and try to get those in. But we'll be faced with the timeline, but we could certainly move forward with that.
Councilor Mills.
Is there any issue with a special meeting, quorum, if people can't be there?
All rules
Like,
apply.
what? So, all right.
So if there's a majority vote, the two counselors that request, either
It's a
myself
quorum.
or the manager, have a special meeting, have to put it in writing, send it to either or. And then during the special meeting day, you do have to have a quorum. If you don't have a quorum, then there is no vote. All the votes are null and void.
All right.
Just can't have it.
Just to be clear, we would not be voting on the 16th. It's the public hearing.
Oh, sure,
We would
the
be
vote
voting
16th.
on the 20th.
So you'd have a public hearing. You don't need quorum for public hearing, or do you need quorum to open the meeting?
You gotta have a quorum.
Yeah.
You gotta open the meeting, you have to have quorum. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So, is there any other, I'm sorry, Councilor Zani?
Well, just, it's really unfortunate that we've gotten to this situation where either we're disenfranchising people or not giving ourselves enough time to really move forward with this and complete the work that we started. So I would just say that I hope the next council is very cognizant of the work that was done and moves that forward in the way that we intended it.
Councilor Carrier?
Help me out with the particulars of this. If we try to get the ballots in and we don't, then it's automatically set aside and we would have to go back out to the June meeting, correct?
If you vote to move this to the voters November 2nd, if the ballots aren't in on time, I'll just, I'll have to mail them out to anybody that has requested a ballot separately from the other ballots. That can cause a lot of confusion as well. But, if you have somebody that maybe they're going to be traveling and they come in, before the ballots get here, then, like I said, they could potentially be disenfranchised by not getting that.
Well, and I was just thinking of if they didn't arrive at all, because having been somebody that works for the delivery services in the country right now, everything being as far behind as they have been, that could be a real issue.
Yeah, I haven't had issues with the delivery of ballots before, but.
Not my company, but the other two, right?
Okay.
Delivery service yet to be named, right? I'm going to call for a vote on this. All those in favor of a special, public hearing on September 16th to discuss our public hearing on the charter review changes, please raise your hand. All those opposed? The motion fails by a vote of 5-2. Okay. Next on the agenda is Resolve 0309072021, which is supporting the naming of the Auburn Lewiston footbridge as the John Jenkins Memorial Footbridge.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor McLeod, second from Councilor Gary. I'll open this up to the public for comment. Anybody in the public like to comment on this one? None being? Okay, I'm gonna, if I could start this off, this is something, it was an idea that myself and Mayor Kerr had about 8 months ago. 6 months ago when former Mayor and State Senator Jenkins passed away. We've had discussions about this. This is something that Lewiston has on their agenda tonight as well. If approved by both communities, we will then start the process with staff of creating, ordering the plaque, and then moving forward to a dedication. Ideally, would be something before winter, okay? So with that said, I'd like to open this up to any comments, questions, concerns. None being? Okay.
I got one. I've had a few calls, especially since we've had the floods that have happened down in the Alabama and them areas. And it really has made a black mark towards John Jenkins because of what's going on down there with the dark-colored people breaking in, lootering, stealing, and every other thing. So I've had some calls that people are very upset that we're trying to place ourselves in a position that some of the words were be special to the black people so that we don't have to worry about the type of things that are going on in these areas. And I really feel bad because John Jenkins and I pretty well grew up together in the recreation department doing many, many things. And I know John Jenkins would never in his life be part of what's going on in these areas. But I had to say something because them are the type of things that put a bad name on good people like John Jenkins. And I'm sorry that that has happened.
Any other comments? Supportive? Non-supportive? Counselor?
I think that should put a bad name on the people who are saying those things to you, not on Mr. Jenkins.
I'm not sure if you call him Senator or Mayor Jenkins. Probably Senator Trump's mayor, though. I wouldn't want to admit that. I don't want to admit that Senator Trump's mayor, though. Honorable. We'll stick with that. I will say that if approved tonight, do not be surprised if there's a slightly different name that comes into a future agenda, i.e. instead of footbridge, pedestrian bridge, something like that, or a middle initial, just FYI on that.
Mr. Mayor? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do support naming this footbridge after the great John Jenkins. I had the privilege of serving with him in the legislature. I knew him when he was mayor, and I knew him, obviously, when he was mayor of Auburn. He was a man that did a lot of great things, and he was a very special individual because he's one of the few that didn't look at color. He was there to help you and motivate you. He didn't thump his nose at anybody or think that he was better than us. And I'm sorry that the people that have come out and talked with the good Council Walker about why we should be naming it after a black gentleman. Well, he is a gentleman, and color should not interfere or interject in this. We have a lot of great people, and I, for one, don't look at people, their color. I look at what's inside them, how they act, and how they treat others.
At this point, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor of the resolve, please raise your hand. Opposed? None being. It passes by a vote of 7-0. Next is Order 09072021, directing staff to request of the Councilor Gary to hold another planning board public hearing on the residential strip zones to be held at the Auburn Senior Community Center. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor McLeod, second from Councilor Lasagna. Open this up to the public for comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? If so, please step up to the podium. None being, we'll bring this back up to council. Council, this would be a third additional public hearing. The second one, there's two that are normal, is actually next Tuesday here at City Council. Notifications have gone out on that one, and they are scheduled to vote on this. So for clarification, I'd like to ask Councilor Gary, since she brought this up, do you want them to table the vote to yet a third meeting, and is there any precedence on this?
Respectfully, Mr. Mayor and city councilors, I don't withdraw my motion to hold a special meeting at the Auburn Senior Community Center to address the concerns of the public. What I witnessed at the last planning board meeting was that those that were here that set up the facility did what they could with what they had. They didn't expect as full a house as it was. We had people in this room crammed. We had people in the bump out room. We had people in the hallway. We had people that came through the doors and said, there's no place for me, and they turned around and went back. Those that were here, they didn't have an option to see the real maps up and close, to talk with anybody, to discuss how that the strip zone or any of these changes of the zones is going to affect them. What I wanted, and the good Councilor Lasagna wanted to do, was to allow a facility big enough to hold Auburn residents so they could feel that they're part of the process and get the answers they needed. I don't want to stonewall this. I don't want to drag it out. And I know if I do a public hearing, there's certain protocols for setting the time that you got to advertise in the paper, how many days you got to do this, and how do you got to do that. Also, what they're going to be discussing at the planning board meeting, which the agenda won't come out till the end of the week, so I can't even discuss tonight what's going to come out there. But who knows, chances are, I heard other notices have been sent out, geared specifically to this new one, and it was over 900 letters sent out to homeowners. So if you got 900, and even if 100 of those showed, we're messed up. I had requested that we look at other venues big enough to hold this, but because of the timing of this and the notices are going out, it ain't gonna happen. So what I'd like to see is whatever the discussion topic that they're bringing up next week, plus what they had discussed this last month, I would like that brought forward to the Senior Community Center for all those to attend, that they can feel comfortable, be able to go up to a board or something to see the map so they can vent their concerns. Who knows, they might change their mind and they still come out and support it. Again, I
Councilor
don't
Gary.
mean disrespect.
No, Councilor Gary, I just want to clarify timing on this with the city manager and make sure everybody's questions are answered. What's the difference in capacity between the Auburn Senior Center and City Hall?
If the entire space is available, we'd have to look at that. We have several evening meetings that are using the front part. But I believe between these two buildings, you're probably looking at, and only using part of the senior center, you're probably looking at about 60 additional people. If the full center was opened up, then we would have, I believe it's 500.
The senior center?
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, no, it's three something. So we're missing out on a few within that first section being closed. So I have had staff look at the calendar. There are several dates that aren't available. We'd have to look at a date separate from when the planning board would normally meet. The question, but for clarification, as you had asked, Mayor, the question would be is this a special meeting of the council, a public hearing for planning board, or just an informational session for more information that staff provides? The moment you bring in the planning board and create it as a public hearing, then as Councilor Gary stated, there are several steps that we would need to do for notifications. And I believe the list started off at 1,400 abutters. Through the process of duplications and other things, it's actually 810 abutters that would receive notification if this is going to be a public
So
hearing.
the first letter, 1,400 received, the second letter, 810 received, after you deduped the list and cleaned it?
That's correct.
So you have 600 less people on this one, on this notification, which made sense because there's a lot of people that were just within 500 feet of a proposed change that were notified in there. If I could, I mean, I just want to make sure everybody's understanding. We'll open this up to some discussion. We all want public input. We have a process that's outlined within our charter, ironically enough, that talks about public hearings, that talks about planning board, city council hearings, open comments, as we heard tonight from individuals, with public input at City Hall. So they have a process. If we want to stay on a schedule, to Councilor Walker, and to your point earlier about making sure that agenda items are handled during this council session,
Right.
I'm not sure if we can delay a process past September 8th by interjecting yet another additional public hearing on one topic. Do we have much precedence on adding public hearing, quote unquote, public hearings that are notified via mail on other topics outside of this? Is this
We've certainly had, Eric's not here to weigh in completely on this, but I think we've had areas that have been tabled in the past, and additional meetings have been set as a result of that. Much smaller. Obviously, this is a large mailing that goes out to 810 abutters. So I don't know when's the last time we've had something this large that we've done. But I would say that the process is available for you, however you'd like to move forward with it. We just need clarification to know that based on the request that was submitted by Councilor Gary and Councilor Lasagna, it specifically stated planning board members, which
Right.
then would create a public hearing of the planning board on this topic, which means that we would have to make sure that we do the proper notifications and another mailing. So that process would have to take place.
And if you call it a workshop, would that still have to do the same stuff?
If you were going to call it a special workshop of the city council,
But can you do it with the planning board? Because the planning board also had a lot of concerns.
But they're going through their process, though. They're going to vote on this a second time.
Right.
It's going to be scheduled for, ideally, for next Tuesday. I would recommend that we make a motion to amend this, to do it as a special council workshop, inviting the planning board to attend, if they so desire, for some time after their next meeting, but before our first reading on this, actually our second reading on this.
So when will the second reading be then?
Well, it's assuming this, I think we could probably do it after, so October, we don't have our second meeting on October.
That might not, by bumping it out too fast, too far out, that won't clear the people's questions and get them the answers. So they may be against it when if they had been able to have the meeting now, basically, I don't mean tomorrow, but now, that might settle their fears, and then they'll be on your side versus opposite side.
I don't know whose side you're
May
talking
I
about.
ask a question through the chair?
Please.
Councilor Gary, is the intent to have more public participation
Right.
rather than, because as it's right here, it is a public hearing. You are looking
Right.
more for a place for everyone to get together, public to come in and talk, have staff there, similar to what was before, and specifically say, I have this issue, this particular question about what this change would bring. Can you pull it up on the map? Is that the intent of what you're looking for?
My
Sort of a staff
original-
level?
My original intent did not say public hearing. That was what the good city manager said it had to be done that way.
So my clarifying question, I guess, to the city manager is, can we have a staff level public participation
So
at the senior center?
And I'll look to Sue. Sue, with the second reading or the second hearing being done on the 14th of September, the planning board has met the requirements, correct?
Planning board is meeting on September 14th, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Second.
So they'll have a second public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about the planning board and what their, what their,
So if they have this public hearing on the 14th,
yeah.
I guess what I would, and again, council, we're trying to move forward with on the fly here with your recommendation, but I think that what you could request of the planning board is to hold a workshop item for the public to be able to come in and ask questions, and make that available without it necessarily being a public hearing, because we've already met that requirement.
Right,
Third one.
yeah.
So, are we in discussion? Can I discuss?
We're in discussion, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, to me, it seems Councilor Gary wants more public input. This comes back to the council as a vote. Is it possible to have a staff-level presentation QA at the senior center after planning board does their second thing? Because that's next week.
October
But prior to it coming back to council, vote.
I would think October 4th, which is a Monday night, which is our normal regular council meeting, but we voted to cancel that council meeting because senior staff is going to be away. I'd recommend that we had a staff presentation if, is amenable, amenable to that. That gives enough notification, a little less than a month for people to be aware of it. It can be spoken about at planning board, and we can have staff there answering any questions
At the senior center.
at the senior center.
Okay, cool.
Does
So
that
did we
clarify?
know, I'm sorry,
I just want to make sure that met what Councilor
That's
Gary's
cool.
intent was, that's all.
Yes, thank you.
do we know what action the planning board was going to take on the 14th?
I don't.
It was
I
a
don't.
vote.
We
It was a
haven't
final
seen-
vote.
So the final vote would have been on the 14th.
This would be their third public hearing on this
So
topic.
then, the planning board could still move forward
Mhm.
with that action without this order requesting the planning board to
Mhm.
table that action,
Mhm.
but potentially still have the hearing. Don't table the
Right.
public hearing. Allow the public hearing to take place because that notification went out. But requesting the planning board to table any action until after the October 4th workshop.
I'm gonna interject, because I don't think that is actually appropriate. I think everything up to that, with all due respect, the city council, the planning board has a set process they have to follow. They can vote on this, and they can give it a favorable recommendation, but it's still just a recommendation to council.
Right.
So you still have a public hearing for people's questions to be answered in between the time of it being approved, let's say, or disapproved. If it's disapproved by planning board, we still have this public hearing because it's just a recommendation and the final vote comes to council. So keep planning board on their schedule, up or down, October 4th, community listening session, workshop, Q&A. We've done this before. That's precedent setting. We have done this several times. And then it comes back to our October 20th meeting, I believe it is, as an agenda item.
And I think, Mr. Mayor, that is a good suggestion because it will allow people to respond to specifically what the planning board is recommending, rather than it being a much more generalized discussion, which we've had a lot of that. And I think that will help people to focus their questions and their concerns. So I think that process, if Councilor Gary is amenable to it, I think that process is one that would work.
Yeah, because the planning board very well could amend this upon second reading and further public, this is the third public hearing on this topic.
Right.
So they could very well amend this from 750 to 700 or whatever, nothing.
Or
right?
vote against it and then,
Or vote against it with another recommendation, that's something. You don't know. But you're right, that would at least focus down that funnel of questions to what's actually on the table that will come back up to city council. So
I'm fine.
and it will satisfy exactly what Councilor Gary and I were concerned about with all the input and questions that people still have.
without getting off schedule for the remainder of the term. So if that's amenable to someone, I'd love to hear a motion to amend the order on the floor to turn this into a staff, listening session, public workshop for October 4th.
Do we need that, or can this just be voted down and direct staff? We need an order to ask staff to do that?
Phil, I'll defer to you on that.
I think I would look to Sue. I think if there was no action taken, they could vote this down, and if this is not a council workshop or council meeting,
Staff on
it's
it.
just a staff only, then we're fine.
Okay, very good then. So just to reiterate, if we vote this down tonight, because this is a staff priority and function, staff will go ahead and do this for hopefully October 4th. Okay, but that date is still up to staff because it might not work with staff.
So you wouldn't amend it to have staff to do it?
No, we will just vote it down. That's, will be, and direct staff based upon this conversation to get it done. We've done that before. Okay, without a resolution or, but you have options. You can do whatever you want. That's the easiest and cleanest, but you also could do an amendment to the order. So, as the mayor and the chair of the proceedings, I will leave that open. If there's any motions to be made, please make them now. None being, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor of the order, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Order fails by a vote of 6-1.
I do want to add that we appreciate how much time and energy the staff has put into this and all the inquiries and the one-on-one meetings that they're having. And hopefully this will allow everybody to feel finally that they've got what they need. But I know how much work it is for the staff.
I'll pass that along.
And last tonight is Order 99-0907-2021, which is authorizing the appropriation of $10,000 from the Comprehensive Plan Fund for the last phase of the MDOT feasibility analysis. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion for Councilor Carrier, second for Councilor McLeod. Open this up to the public for comment. None being, I'm going to bring this back up to the council. Before, I just want to make the public and the council aware of a couple things on this. Earlier this year, this is in your packet too, the legislature approved legislation directing Maine Department of Transportation to complete the final phase of a feasibility analysis for expanding passenger rail access to the Auburn Lewiston area, connecting Maine's second largest metro area to Portland. The MDOT is prepared to move forward with this project. The final phase requires a 10% local match of the estimated cost of the project at $200, or not to exceed $200,000. The city of Lewiston has committed, I believe, already committed $10,000 earlier this year, and we're now, the legislature is now seeking Auburn to commit $10,000. Now, we do have a letter attached from Senator Libby, who is the sponsor of this legislation, talking about the feasibility study, giving us a little history as well on past feasibility studies and why this is the last one, so to speak. We have had also some correspondence by former Councilor Stone, former Mayor Labonte, talking about some of the pros and the cons. As you might know, they sat on the City of Auburn committee to study passenger rail service to Auburn back in 2017 and beyond and before. I think they finished their work up in 2017, 2018. So that's kind of the information to bring you all up to speed. Some of the issues that we've heard from both Councilor Bob and former Mayor Labonte was, are any other communities contributing? Is it just Auburn and Lewiston? Portland, Yarmouth, Pownell, or any of those contributing at least proportionally to this? We've also heard and had questions asked on whether or not $200,000 is enough. Should it be $400,000 or $500,000 to get a full final study done? So you have all that information. There's a lot. I'll open this up to the floor for discussion. One more thing. Right now we're looking at comp plan funds. There is a possibility to use ARPA funds for this as well, I believe, on a study. You would just have to make the motion to amend that funding source within the order. So that's on the table for you all as well. I'll open this up to debate. Councilors? Councilor Lasagna?
I have, in just my short 3.5, almost 4 years here, I've watched this ping pong around, people discussions with this, went to one meeting initially, and is $10,000 going to change anything in terms of the discussion about this or how we move forward? It doesn't feel that way to me. And are we required to do $10,000? And then also, what about the other cities that would be along the route? Are they also contributing?
So just to give you the letter of the law, the impacted communities have to contribute in total 10% of the feasibility study. Right now, Lewiston kind of took the precedence of funding 50%. We have on the table us funding 50. To answer your question, no. The other communities have not offered to help fund this. I have not talked to those other communities in quite a while about that as well, but they haven't. Nor have they probably been officially asked either, to be quite fair. I hope that answers your
They
question.
should be asked.
Can I ask a question about what is the remainder of, what's the balance on the comprehensive plan fund? What percentage would this represent?
Still, I don't know if we.
It's probably $10,001.
The small amount to what's available.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Support or non-support of this, Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm perplexed in a certain way. We've already given 50,000. Lewiston's already given 50,000 for a study that we thought was going to be complete, and we were going to know for sure or not if we were going to be able to get passenger rail, since we already did 50. And now they want 10,000. Where is it going to stop? And is there a guarantee if we did vote tonight to give the 10,000, we'll actually see a train pull in here and have a station? I don't know. It seems like it's turning into an even more money pit. I mean, hey, I want a good return on my investment. I know we've got a lot of constituents that would like to see the train and the rail here. Heck, we've got enough tracks that we should have it here.
Any other comments on this?
Yeah, I got a comment for you. I think this is a big black hole, and I think we're gonna waste our money for a long time playing around with all of this ping pong back and forth. I think we shut them off now, make them wake up and realize that if they want us on board, they do a hell of a lot more than what they've done the last 4 years. This has been around for a long time, and all they're doing is asking us to flip the bill for them. You know, we had a gentleman sit here from Augusta and tell us how promising all this was 8 years ago. Nothing's been promised that's worked out yet that they promised that they were going to do. So keep the 50,000 we gave them and go to bed with it and wake up 100 years from now.
We can only hope. Is there any other comments on this? Mr. Manager, do you have something?
I was just going to add, I just want to make sure it was highlighted that Senator Libby did advocate to have 2 representatives on the committee. And so Lincoln Jeffers from Lewiston, and then it would be Glenn Holmes from Auburn if the council was to. So I just want to make sure that was noted.
And if we don't give the $10,000, what happens?
Someone else has to give the $10,000 for it to go through.
So if it's split between the other 3 towns or 2 towns between here and there, so that they have some buy-in to this too. I feel like it's fallen on our 2 communities when it would benefit these other communities as well.
This is the way the bill was written, and it's specifically
Yeah.
stated. So that's why it's being brought before Lewiston.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with the council design. I mean, Portland has more to gain to this from Auburn, frankly.
Is there any reason that this would need to be voted on tonight versus tabling it until we get some more answers back on other communities? Or?
The legislation has a pretty strict time frame of when the report has to be turned in, which is March 1st of 2022. Delaying might not be an option. Now, like anything else, I think everything's fungible. I'm getting a sense right now that the council is not warm to spend $10,000 on this in light of some intel that we've received. If that's the case, and the council votes no on this, what I will probably do is reach out official communication to the outlying communities to see if they would support this between now and our next meeting to handle Councilor Lasagna's suggestion, and probably talk with our legislative member, Senator Claxton, Senator Libby, and others to see if there's any way that this could be actually beefed up to be a true economic impact study. This was also passed before the state received its share of ARPA funds for transportation. So that dynamic has changed a little bit, and it's worth exploring. I don't think anything can be explored unless direct act by the governor very quickly, or actually might have to wait till the next session, which might not be enough time. I'm not sure. But even if you vote against this tonight, the bottom line is, I know I will. I know the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Corporation, whose chair is former Mayor Labonte. I'm a director as well. Glenn Holmes is a director. We will still work on this, okay, to see if we can get something that's more favorable, something that actually works. And then if we do, we'll bring it back. There's still a significant desire in this community to exhaust all options to see if this is feasible. Because we have to kind of, it's one of those things where we kind of have to know, one way or the other, without any regret. So that's the thought there, okay? Any other questions on that or comments?
So just to clarify, you said that a final report would need to be completed by March 1st, 2022?
Yeah.
For the final, so the funding, this $200,000 would create a final report that would be in our hands at least sometime after that date?
Would be in the legislature hands probably simultaneously.
So the concern about actually receiving results, I mean, it seems like there's a timeline under which we would receive final results from this study.
There is a discussion on whether or not they will be truly final results. There's been folks that have said, including former Mayor Labonte, that $200,000 study, what that gets you would not be the final. That it would just trigger more questions and more final result studies. So to do it correctly, it was around $400,000 to $500,000 in order to do a true economic impact study. That would look at everything and it would take more time. So there's a little disconnect here with the legislation, as well as what other folks are saying as well, and what the final outcome needs to be.
We were promised a lot of things when we gave the 50,000 too, and we received almost nothing. We went to meetings after meetings to listen to a lot of blown out air, and that's about what we got for our $50,000. We have people sitting on our bus transportation here that has agreed to cut bus transportation in our city when we have a north end of the city and a south end, that we should be trucking people home when they want to go home and trucking them to the Walmart when they want to go to the Walmart. And here we are going to give these jokers another $10,000, but we take our own people that live in this city and tell them, if you want to get there, you walk there because we're cutting off your route from the buses. Let's take care of what we know runs in this city. Let's make it better, and then maybe we'll get in bed with these guys. Till then, they don't get my vote.
Is there any other comments on this?
It sounds to me like we're throwing good money after bad.
Okay. I'm going to ask for a vote at this time. All in favor of the resolution to fund $10,000 towards the legislative rail study, please raise your hand. All those in opposition? Abstain, none being. It fails by a vote of 7-0. I will keep working this issue unless the council directs me not to see if we can find something that's more advantageous and that's better with different partners, of course. And if something does change, I'll bring it back up to the council, okay?
Well, and that's what I was going to ask, is if, because I'm not just interested in the passenger rail, I'm interested in the rail as a whole, and if we're going to pay for something, I'd like to see something that would be comprehensive of not only the passenger rail, but the rail system that we already have in effect, which we've been talking about for the 30 years that I've lived here. And we still have done nothing with the fact that Auburn is the only station in all of the Northeast that can handle double-stack containers. And if we're going to have to invest in something, I would like to see us actually have that as part of the plan, because that would open up a lot more opportunities as opposed to a passenger rail, because a double-stack going north to Canada and all the way across the Canadian rail, which is all set up for double-stack, we could be doing with business with Vancouver. And so I'd like to see that as being as part of the set.
Very good then. We'll move right along here to this last open session of the night. If anybody in the public would like to speak about any issue that's not on tonight's agenda, please step up to the podium and state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. There is nobody. I will now close the second open session of the night. We're going to move on to reports. Excuse me, mayor's report. We got a lot of things going on in the city. Of course, it's fall, it's back to school. Drive slowly, drive slowly, drive slowly. Your kids are out there. If you live in a surrounding town and you just pass through Auburn going like a pretty darn quick, please slow down, because our kids are out there, okay? So I've been noticing that. Traffic calming is in full effect, and it needs to be. Second, September 25th from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock, we do have a official Blues and Brews Festival at Anniversary Park presented by Auburn Savings Bank, which has come along as the major presenting sponsor Hats off to Auburn Savings Bank for doing that and making another event in Auburn an actual tradition. So we're really excited about that. Again, that's September 25th. Also, I'd like to report that the Maine State Bicentennial Parade, which happened, was an absolutely lovely day, great turnout. Hats off to staff. They did a phenomenal job. Thank you very much, Phil. Brian, please pass along our thanks to all the staff. We were the talk, and we still are, the talk of the state of Maine on how to run an organization, an event perfectly. Everybody talks about Auburn, and we did. So, outstanding job to everybody on that. I'd like to also report that I'll be speaking in front of the Legislative Committee on affordable housing this Thursday afternoon. They're having a public comment. Myself and the city manager from Fort Fairfield will be speaking on behalf of the Maine Municipal Association in our work group. If anybody has any ideas or bullets, please send them to me beforehand. The work group has already had meetings. We've got a pretty good idea of what municipalities kind of could need in order to make sure we have more attainable housing. So please send me along any thoughts that you might have from your own perspectives. That's it for a report. I'll turn it over to councilors. Any councilor have a report? Councilor Boss, starting with you.
Thank you. I have an update from the public library. We have a new children's librarian who is starting actually today, I believe, whose name is Brandon Dyer, and he is coming to us from the McMahon Elementary Library in Lewiston. So it's very exciting. Another update from the Agricultural Committee. We've already heard about the public meeting that we held last week. And I think it was a great opportunity for folks to have a chance to talk to Karen Scammon and her staff to understand the impact of deepening the residential strip. And good conversation was had there. I'd also like to suggest that we create or form a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for this city. I think that publicly honoring an honorable black man should not be an issue in this community, and I think that there's really no place for overt racism here. So I'd like to have a conversation about DEI and how we fully implement the statement and the work that we did previously in this term.
Councilor McLeod?
Just that the LATC is meeting tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have the ATRC transit study by the end of the month, so it will be in council's hands hopefully after that.
Very good. Any other acronyms you want to throw out there for us? Three's a charm. Councilors, reports. Councilor Gary?
May I ask a question through the chair to the
Yes.
city manager? Are you going to give us an update tonight on our 9/11 ceremony up on Minot Avenue this weekend?
I can.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor Walker, then Councilor Carrier.
Also going through the chair to the manager, would you explain to us exactly what's going on in the Chestnut Street Gully? What are we doing there? What are we spending for money there? What is it going to end up being at the end?
No, the futsal court. The futsal. Futsal. Futsal court. Not foosball, but futsal court. So we approved that was on our CIP.
We might have, but we haven't heard any reports on it, and they're down there working, building something. Maybe be nice to hear from somebody.
So you have a rec update coming up. I believe is it the 20th?
Yeah, the 20th.
So it'll be on the workshop for the 20th. And that'll be included in the update.
Councilor Carrier?
From the airport, for those of you that haven't heard, the airport has hired an interim manager to fill in with the death of Rick Lanneman. It is Betty Ann Sheets. Betty brings a wealth of knowledge in regards to airport operations and flight operations, and she will be filling in until we are able to hire a permanent director for the airport. And from the council to the city manager, it can be from the school board, it can be from me. Could we please direct the police department, police chief, to hire 2 more police officers to write citations in this city, because I've almost been run over now on the main thoroughfares 4 times in the last 3 days by people that were exceeding the speed limit grotesquely on Center Street, on Hotel Road, and on Minot Avenue. It's getting to be ridiculous. The streets are not safe. And if we have to hire officers to write more tickets, I'm all for it.
That brings up, I mean, that kind of dovetails, Councilor Carrier, I think it's, and I'll talk to the city manager about having a workshop in the near future about traffic calming techniques, looking at accidents, looking at where these people are. I think the more and more folks we have living, this has been proven outside of Auburn, because they're not living in Auburn, is causing higher degrees of speed, traffic counts, and roads that can't handle it. We need to look at this. We need to find some solutions. It is getting bad out there. So, and I hate to be having this conversation after someone is a victim of a traffic accident. There's a couple things I forgot, I'm sorry, and I'll turn over to the manager. From the school committee side, I've been filling in as the mayor's rep for Councilor Carrier now, hopefully not for much longer.
No, I'm back.
And I'll discuss that with him outside the meeting. Things are going pretty smoothly. His finance committees are meeting this week. His kids are back in school, and knock on wood, everything is going smoothly. We're going to hopefully it stays that way. There was one other thing. Bear with me 1 second. Yep, and that was it. I'll turn over to the manager for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Council Gary asked about regarding the September 11th event. This will be held Saturday, that's this Saturday, September 11th, 8:15 a.m. at the Auburn Fire Department Central Station, which is 550 Minot Avenue. This will be the 20th anniversary ceremony, so we certainly do encourage everyone to come. This is a rain or shine event, so if you're available, please arrive at the fire department for this. The Councilor Walker, I believe, talked about LATC eliminating routes. So there was a study that's done, as Councilor McLeod had mentioned. However, no action by LATC has been taken regarding implementing any of those changes. We'll receive tomorrow night, we'll review that study for the first time after its completion as a board. The Lake Auburn study has been delayed by FB Environmental. We are hoping to see that study by the end of September. As I mentioned, we'll make that available to you as soon as possible. Council did recommend that maybe we put something on the city's website under reports and studies. We'll do that. We'll put a notification out that the study is still pending to receive that. And as soon as we have that, we'll make that available, and we'll make it available on the city's website. I already mentioned the futsal court. We'll do that. Councilor Carrier mentioned regarding traffic enforcement. We have been talked with the chief last week, talked to him again this morning. Last week we were discussing regarding the impacts of the staff, police officers being at the schools, making that a priority for speed enforcement. They've done that 2 weeks leading up to school starting, and they're doing it now that school has started, conducting traffic enforcement there. I'll have them move that out to some of our corridors moving forward. One of our biggest challenges right now, if you are on Court Street or Western Avenue for the start of school, you'll notice that traffic is now backed up the entire length of Court Street from Golf Hill leading up to the school. We are in a challenge when it comes to using Harris Road as the only access in to be able to get to the school because of the construction that's taking place on Western Maine. So we are working on that. We are probably allocating additional officers. We have had 2 officers out there since the beginning of school, started just directing traffic. We'll be putting notification out, encouraging, and signage out on Minot Avenue, encouraging motorists who are just passing through not to take Court Street, to take Minot Avenue and avoid that Court Street corridor because of the delays that we're having. And we also encourage parents. Part of the challenge too is, if you've read in the paper, there's a bus driver shortage within the schools, so that is adding to the bus routes. I believe the school department was down at least 5 drivers for the beginning of school. That's across the state. There's been articles in the paper regarding how this is impacting most school districts. Because of that, we have an increase of parents bringing students to school. Because if there's a delay, if they're going to be on the bus for an hour and 45 minutes, then many will bring them to school. That is causing additional traffic coming up and creating an impact. So that is taking place. We are working through it. We had a discussion. Part of this also is we have an increased amount of traffic on Court Street because of the timing of the closure of Hotel Road. So that Hotel Road closure is pushing more traffic onto Court Street as part of their detour. So we have several different moving pieces here. Chief is going to be speaking with the engineer regarding Hotel Road. I can tell you Hotel Road is on schedule, on time for completion, but that's still around the 1st of October. So that is still moving forward. However, that is creating delays. The biggest item is for us to really push out, and we'll do this through social media, we'll do it through signage, encouraging those who can avoid Court Street to avoid Court Street, stay on Minot Avenue, and allow for Court Street to be for parents that are trying to drop off their students. The chief did talk to the superintendent about potentially flipping. Some of that it has to do with who's being picked up first, whether it's at the high school or middle school, having a bigger conversation about that because that could create a little, reduce some of the congestion that's taking place. But just so you know, there is a lot of discussions and we are looking for some solutions. We talked earlier today about even just a temporary light, much like they did at Park Avenue and Mount Auburn Avenue. There's a concern there with Harris. It just is not the same type of road construction, design rather, for that, but we are looking at it. We don't believe there'll be any impact on Western Maine to do that as a temporary solution because it's really Harris that's backing up most of the traffic. But that's as an update just for you on what's taking place.
This just brings something up really quickly. Councilor Walker and I have been talking about transportation, and in my mind, it's for older people getting into the city, the center. This could also be something that could be considered in the future in terms of students, that they're not just taking a school bus, but that maybe there's public transportation, like in other cities, that students can take.
So the superintendent and I had a good conversation regarding this before school started, as she was planning on the impact of driver shortage, to look at LETC. LETC, also CityLink also has a driver shortage, which was creating about a 2-hour headway on most routes. So that wasn't going to be something that would work, but I think you're right, moving forward, this is a resource. How do we use it? And could we use it for at least our high school and our middle school, potential middle school age students? That could be a solution.
Is there anything that we can do short-term to allocate emergency funds to officers or deputized people to do traffic control like we've done, like we used to do in front of middle school, to alleviate that? Is there somebody retired that we could pay extra that the city council could allocate that money to get out there and do that?
So it does not require a sworn officer to direct traffic. So we could have that discussion about who could we place at some of this for assistance. What we're finding with the 2 additional officers, these are SROs that are directing traffic, is that it's still being,
It's not helping.
it's delaying it, but it's moving them through safely, but it's not making the traffic move any faster.
I think this is a broader conversation for our workshop, especially in light of the variable of Hotel Road. I will say that has caused a ripple effect, some good learnings, and in the neighborhoods of West Auburn and North Auburn Road, substantial decrease in speed, because people are finding the right ways to get to Turner and not doing the cut through on Hotel. And the light on Park. I think I've been hearing a lot of people are very excited and very happy that light exists because it's calming traffic down, and maybe that we need to keep that light permanently. Right now it's temporary.
Which light?
The light at the corner of Park and
Mount Auburn.
Mount Auburn Avenue.
Yeah.
So I've asked staff to look at some of our crash data. We've had an increase in crashes since the light has been installed. So we'll be monitoring that. So that has had an impact, and so we'll be sure to look at that as well.
I guess that's one way to slow down a car. crashes. I've had about 5 accidents on my road in a month, so. Councilor Auburn.
Yeah, Mr. Manager, you may want to look at going in from Western Avenue into the high school again, because most of the gravel has been brought into that school, and the big trucks have been cut down to a very, very small amount. So the only real travel they got going in now is what's delivered, which is just a few. So you maybe can split the road, have it one way going in only for the students or somebody, the buses, somebody. It might help you out a little bit on the other end.
They're meeting with the contractors this week to discuss maybe limiting the closure time so that it's at least open during, for drop-off and pickup, and then close during the other hours. So, so yes, that's happening this week.
That'd be good.
So, trying to find solutions.
Okay, so it'll definitely be a topic for further conversation. At this point, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor
Second.
say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. We now stand adjourned.